Hi guys, Justin here. Just got to the trailhead. I'm starting a 2-day gear testing trip where I'm going to be going on a hike today and then going to a camp and setting up for the night. Over the course of the trip, I'm going to go over why I think it's super important to test your gear in controlled environments before taking it out on any big trips. You're going to get some insights into how I test gear for myself and all the reviews that you see on this channel. I'll provide some tips on how you can test gear for yourself so that you're confident and comfortable with any new gear that you might acquire. I'm going to get my gear all set up and we'll hit the trail. I've used and tested a lot of gear over the years, and I've seen firsthand how important it is to test your gear in a controlled environment before taking it on a big trip. And there are 4 main things that I want to touch on with regards to gear testing. First of all, I want to get a little bit more detail on why it's important to test your gear. Second, which gear you should focus on for testing. Third, where you should go to test your gear. And fourth, how to test your gear and what kind of tools you may need to do that. First up, why you should test your gear. One of the reasons is that you want to get your gear out into the wild and use in a controlled environment where you can test it and make sure that you actually know how to use that piece of gear. For example, if you got a new tent, you want to take it, set it up a few times, make sure that you can do it quickly and efficiently. So if you are on a trip, you need to set it up quickly due to a rainstorm or something, then you can do that quickly and aren't going to run into any snags. Another reason is that you want to identify any issues with the gear due to manufacturing defects or to limitations that the gear has due to its inherent design features. An example of that would be insulation. A down jacket will only keep you warm to a certain point, and you want to make sure that you're testing that jacket out to make sure that you know what that lower temperature limit is and what temperatures it's going to keep you warm at. You don't want to be trying to figure that out 3 days in on a big long trip when the temperatures drop and all of a sudden you don't have enough insulation to keep yourself warm. And as much as our value ratings, temperature ratings, and reviews can help you understand gear, everyone's different, and you want to make sure that you're testing the gear out in a way that ensures that it's the right piece of gear for you. There's definitely some more reasons why it's important to test out gear, but those are the main reasons I think that it's important. So you don't need to test every piece of gear. I think it's important to test your critical gear. If you're going camping, that could be your tent or your sleeping pad or sleeping bag. If you're going skiing, then maybe that's your skis or bindings. In the wintertime, I also like to test clothing to see what its warmth limits are, as well as see how it handles different intensity of activities, specifically how it handles moisture management, as well as wicking and temperature regulation. For instance, right now I'm wearing a merino wool shirt and I'm testing this out to see how it handles a high exertion activity like snowshoeing. And right now it's doing great at temperature regulation as well as wicking my moisture and letting it evaporate through my soft shell here. I've also been continuously testing this down jacket. You may be familiar with it, the Decathlon Trek 100. I've been talking about it quite a bit on the channel recently. And down jackets are something that I think really require a lot of testing, as it's usually one of those last warmth layering pieces that you'll bring on a trip. This is probably the 10th, 12th, maybe more trip that I brought this jacket on, because I like to be testing my gear in different scenarios and see how it works in the real world under different conditions. The next topic is going to be where to test your gear. Right now I'm on a snowshoe out on a trail, but I'm gonna finish this trail off, head to a campsite, and that's gonna be the second location where I think it's important to be testing gear, so I'll see you there. So we made it into camp. It's actually morning right now. I got in after dark last night and set up my tent and got dinner ready and ate it. And this is actually a car camping spot. Car camping is a great way to test out your camp gear, and your camp gear usually consists of some of your more critical gear items like your tent, a sleep system, and cook system. And with car camping, worst case scenario, if you get cold at night, your stove doesn't work, you just pack up, get in your car, and drive home. Another place that you can test gear is just around town and at home. When I first got this down jacket, I just wore it to the store, wore it out and about, and that was how I got some initial impressions on how it performed. I've also been known to use a sleeping pad or test out a pillow on my condo floor or out on the balcony. So you can do those different things as well when testing out your gear. A third way to test your gear is like you saw yesterday with a day hike. Just take your gear out, test it out, and see how it performs. With all these locations, the key is to not actually push your gear to failure unless you do have an exit strategy. Like with car camping, if your gear fails, you can get out pretty quickly and efficiently. But if it's -20 out and your sleep system starts failing you, you really don't want to be having to get out of your tent and get into your car and drive home. It's going to be really cold. So make sure you're slowly increasing the conditions under which you're testing out your gear. So that brings me to the final thing I want to talk about, and that's how to test out your gear. It mostly just consists of using the gear, slowly taking the gear out on different trips and pushing the limits of the gear. For instance, I've been using this down jacket for the last 3 months or so. I started off taking it out in conditions that were around freezing, getting it a little bit colder, and then this trip it got down to about -15 degrees Celsius, which is the coldest that I've actually had the jacket, and it's doing pretty good. So just make sure you incrementally push those limits as you're testing out your gear. I also use a variety of tools. One of my favorite tools, and something that I've talked about in other videos, is a little temperature pod that connects to my Garmin Fenix watch. And I'll keep that pod outside of my tent on a guy line, and then it sends the temperature to my watch and also tracks it over the course of the night. So if I wake up in the middle of the night really cold, I can pinpoint the exact temperature that it was and then know that that's probably approaching the limit of my gear. I also have a laser thermometer, which I use for testing ground temperature, which is awesome for testing out sleeping pads, as well as a wind meter that I use for testing out what the wind speed is, and that's useful when looking at stoves or tents. I'm a big fan of A/B testing as well, and what that consists of is taking a piece of gear that you know very well and are comfortable with, and then using it side by side with a new piece of gear. And I'm gonna be doing that with these stoves here. I have a third stove, the Pocket Rocket 2, that I know very, very well, and I'm gonna be seeing how it performs alongside these 2 new stoves that I'm testing out. I'll also do A/B testing with outerwear like this down jacket. I'll take a jacket like the Ghost Whisper that I know how it performs, I know what its limits are, and over the course of a camping trip, I'll switch it on, switch it off, and see how both jackets perform in the exact same conditions. And the reason why I'm talking about it, why it's so important to test your gear in controlled environments, is because it's easy to test gear in a living room or just read reviews, see what other people did, but everyone's different, and it's important to get gear out into the wild and see how it performs for you. I bet there's a lot of people out there, myself included, I've done this before too. I get a new piece of gear, super excited right before a big trip, and I just take it out on the trip without ever having tested it in a controlled area like a car camping trip or a day hike. And that's really risky. Even for some solid pieces of gear, you might end up with a manufacturing defect, and then you're pooched when you're out on the trail. There you have it, a bit of insight into how I test my gear. All the gear that you've seen in my reviews and on this channel, I've put through some variation of this testing process. There's quite a bit that goes into testing gear, but I really enjoy it and love sharing that information with you guys. If you have any questions about the system that I use or any specifics for how you might test a specific piece of gear, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.